Good afternoon or good morning or good evening whenever you're chiming in. You're going to notice a little bit of a different background. This is not the usual crypt background. It's winter time here in Northern Virginia, and the crypt unfortunately is very, very cold right now. So I'm doing a temporary location. So as soon as the weather gets nicer again, we'll go back to the way things were before. But for those of you on Patreon, you'll notice that I posted a short story recently called Shakespeare's Dishwater. So what I wanted to do is create an audio version of that as well for people who want to listen to it instead of reading it themselves. Again, all this stuff is available on Patreon, or all my short stories are available on Patreon. So here we go. This is Shakespeare's Dishwater. Dishwater has a way of warming the hands and at the same time leaving a disgusting filth clinging to them. Still, the dishes must get done. Day after day, week after week, year after year, the dishes got done. At first, it was not a big deal if they went a meal without doing them. Soon, he let it slip that he hated seeing the dirty dishes in the sink. The first time she told him to do the dishes himself, she got a slap for it. Of course, he didn't mean it. He never did. The first time was because he had a hard day at work and fought with his boss. The next time was a complete accident. Well, after a while, he stopped even trying to make excuses for his increasingly irrational and violent behavior. A few more pans in the sink would finally be clear. Barry hated noises. She learned to wash with as little sound as possible. No one needed water running, no pans hitting each other, not even the slightest noise was allowed. Another pan, this one not too dirty, reminded her of their wedding day. They got a pan just like this one from his aunt and uncle as a present. It was a cheap pan, but good enough at a time when cost meant everything to a couple just starting out in the world. That was a different time, a different Barry than the monster coming home daily, like someone broke in and replaced the man she loved. Most nights he'd be home late as he went out for a few drinks with the boys. Those few drinks would turn into just a few more. She tried to appeal to him to at least slow down his drinking and got a broken arm for her protestations. Most of his drunker nights were the better nights of the week. The alcohol made it hard for him to put any force behind the blows. Many nights he was just too drunk to carry out the ritual beating. It also meant she could sleep without too much fear of her blind drunk husband waking up. Plunging deep into the water, she recoiled at the sudden sensation of flesh connecting with the blade of a carving knife recently put into service at the dining room table. Marian held her finger as blood trickled out between the soap bubbles. "If you prick me, do I not bleed?" Not a deep cut, but one that would require a bandage. If he saw it, he would undoubtedly make some joke about her being a klutz and how she needed to be more careful. To avoid a fight, she would just laugh it off and move on with the daily grind. Life was not about laughter. It was about avoiding pain. She ran into one of her old friends one day at the grocery store who'd noticed a bruise on Marian's neck. She did her best to laugh it off as just her own clumsiness. But it was clear from the way her friend looked at her that she didn't believe her. "Are you sure you're all right, Marian?" "Sure, I just have to learn to be more careful." "How is Barry anyway? I haven't seen him in a while." "Oh, he's doing all right, busy at work." "Well, you know husbands. Can't live with them, and modern-day forensics makes killing them too hard to get away with." There was something in the voice of her friend which told Marian she didn't believe her. But the red of the blood in the soap bubbles made Marian think. Her friends, well-meaning as they were, had the sad effect of reminding her how life could be without Barry around. She tried to tell herself many times that things would change, that Barry would change. Increasingly, she realized this was a lie she told herself to push through the pain. "If you were gone, I would be all alone," she remembered thinking to herself. The idea of being alone used to terrify her, but increasingly it held a tantalizing promise. Outside of their immediate relatives, who would really miss Barry? "If you tickle us, do we not bleed? Do we not laugh?" There were good times, but those seemed like wisps of fog in the rearview mirror of her memory. After they were married, they drove north to Niagara Falls. It seemed like the right thing to do, if not a little cliché. They laughed about every little thing they saw. A young couple with kids, an old couple walking slowly. Small houses ringed with white picket fences all seemed humorous as they reveled in their punch-drunk love. Barry was funny back then. He always knew how to tell a good joke. Truth be told, he still did. On the odd occasion he allowed them to go out to be social, Barry was the center of attention. Keeping her close at hand, he wove an intricate web of jokes and one-liners. But that was always Barry, the life of the party. A pretty facade on a house rotting from within. While her friends suspected, his friends seemed oblivious. As long as he made them laugh and bought rounds of drinks, they didn't care. While she was still alive, Marian's mother asked her one night if Barry had been abusing her. Like an out-of-body experience, she heard herself explain to her mother how everything was fine and that Barry was wonderful. As if taking on the form of Barry herself, she laughed it away and made a joke. All the while, a younger version of herself, trapped inside of her bruised and battered body, screamed out that she did not have to take the abuse. The younger version of herself begged her to tell the truth and flee the man she grew to hate and fear. "If you poison us, do we not die?" How unfortunate would it be if Barry were to suddenly fall victim to food poisoning, she thought to herself after a particularly brutal night. Once Marian went to the library and read everything she could find about poisonings. Reading over famous murder cases, she even went as far as to look up how to make her own poison. It would be almost too easy. After a night of drinking, she only needed to bring him a beer with a little of her own special something added. A short while later, he would be gasping for breath on the couch. The only thing left would be to call 911 and play the role of grief-stricken widow. Only after the truth was discovered, she could share her own personal living hell with 12 strangers. No jury would ever convict. Sure, their 17-year-old would be devastated, but she could go live with their 23-year-old son in Des Moines. Of course, their son would be concerned, but he was smart and could understand what had taken place. Quietly, the kids would approve, and after the smoke settled, she could join them. She remembered him walking in one night. The squeaky hinges on the back door opening and closing, and the cheap wooden door slamming in the frame. "Marian, I'm home." His heavy footsteps through the kitchen served as a telltale sign he had had more than just a few and would easily fall into a slumber. She served him dinner that night with a healthy dose of what she so desperately hoped would kill him in his sleep. Admittedly, the poison was a good idea, but it failed. Something went wrong, and it only made him sick for a few days. For her troubles, she had to spend more time with him, waiting on him hand and foot while he played video games. As soon as he was feeling well enough again, the beatings continued. "If you wrong us, shall we not revenge?" The big pot, finally clean, sat in the dish drainer. She hadn't planned on washing the dishes at all. There were larger issues on her mind tonight. Perhaps it was her last act of defiance, a way to put it all behind her. To anyone else in the world, it stood out simply as a pile of dirty dishes. And still that man possessed her in an almost indescribable way. Even now she washed those dishes, even though every fiber of her being told her not to. The younger side of her screamed out to leave the dishes in the sink. Funny, the younger version of herself would have said something about how you only live once and the dishes would wait until the next day. Still, his shouts of rage propelled her to wash the damned dishes and keep as quiet as possible. Behind her, the far larger mess awaited her. One which should have taken precedence. The rational portion of her brain pointed out how incredibly illogical the need to wash those dishes were at this particular time. With the final dish in the drainer, she pulled the stopper out of the sink. Dirty water, bubbles, blood, and lukewarm water vanished into the plumbing under the sink. The coffee maker beeped, indicating the hot plate was about to shut off. Marian poured herself a final cup of coffee and switched the power button into the off position. He would have throttled her for having a cup of coffee after dinner. "It was not the way things are done," he would say. Perhaps that, and not the dishes, was her final act of defiance. She turned toward the table to see the remains of the pot roast, mashed potatoes, and carrots. She worked hard on that dinner, and it was good. Not fancy, but delicious. Barry, home early that day, made a remark about how ordinary it looked. An ordinary meal from an ordinary wife no other husband would put up with. Hatred and anger overtook her. Wresting control of her actions, the blade of the carving knife, freshly covered in beef juice, plunged deep into his chest over and over again. The younger version of herself sat on the top of the cupboard, screaming her approval, joined by the voices of her mother, friends past and present, and hundreds of others who knew or suspected what happened in their home but refused to act. Blood dripped from the walls, chandelier, cabinets, down from the front of Barry's shirt, and it formed in a pool on the floor. Crimson liquid seethed from every wound, no longer pulsing as the heart which kept it pumping ceased to function. A stupid, shocked look plastered over her newly former husband's face. Placing the knife into the dishwater, she returned to the table and resumed eating. Occasionally, Marion looked up at her husband as if expecting some sort of quip or remark. He was uncharacteristically silent. Sitting in the living room as the dishes dried, she took a sip of the coffee and snapped on the television. Scenes from Venice played out across the screen, making her consider the possibility of taking a vacation. She'd always wanted to see Italy. Pulling her phone from her pocket, she dialed a number she dreamed about for many years. Hello? Yes, hello. My name is Marion Barrows. Can you send someone to my address, please? No, I'm in no danger. It's just that, well, I've killed my husband. That is the end of Shakespeare's Dishwater. If you like this, please remember you can always contribute on Patreon. It supports all my writing efforts and all my video efforts and my novel writing, and I really certainly appreciate it. Have a great day. Bye-bye.